The Holden Project.
Created by Karina, Kiyone, and Madi. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger is about a 16-year-old boy, Holden, who tries to escape adulthood by refusing to grow up. The novel starts out with Holden getting kicked out of his boarding school, Pensy Prep. Due to this harsh reality, Holden finds himself wandering in New York. While out in New York, Holden tries everything in his power not to go home, and as a result, he calls old friends, past flings, and even talks with perfect strangers, until eventually the only thing left to do is return home.
Through experiences, education, and the environment in which one grows up in changes how one matures from childhood to adulthood.
Depending on one's environment, the rate of maturity varies. In urban areas, everything is rushed, people are ruder, and there is a higher probability of a loss of innocence. In rural areas, people are nicer, they know their neighbors, and suffer hardships together. Growing up in New York, Holden has a tendency to be rude and speak tactlessly. His inability to think before he speaks displays a childish attitude. Social class and money have a huge influence. The destitute value money and possessions. The rich give it little thought. The class one is born into is most likely their class for life. In the video, Social Class in America, they say, the ascribed status of his parents is still the class to which he belongs. Holden was born to a rich family. He has never needed money and tends to spend it haphazardly. I think they should have at least offered to pay for the drinks they had before I joined them. I wouldn't have let them naturally, but they should have at least offered. Holden barely knows them, let alone likes them, yet he is willing to pay for their drinks. His inability to understand the value of money underscores his immaturity.
Education in the 1950s was not nearly as important as it is currently. In the 1950s, many students dropped out of school before high school and college. Students were taught to act appropriately, do their homework, study for tests, and get good grades. Even though many students dropped out, that is what was expected. Now, there are even fewer students that drop out of high school and sometimes college. Students are expected to do the same as they did in the 1950s, but much more. In today's society, adults have ingrained in the student's mind that they must finish college and get a good job. In this particular community of Bloomfield Hill, the standard acceptable jobs are being a doctor, lawyer, financer, and going into business. In this case, kids today are taught from a young age to strive for the best. On that note, this is an example of how students today are currently in the process of going from a child to an adult. The difference between the types of schools are that in public schools, you're not as independent and you have your parents to rely on. In private schools, it's pretty much the same as public schools, but the students are wealthier and are more pampered. On the other hand, boarding schools, you would have to be more independent because you're on your own and you don't have your parents to rely on. Being in boarding school, Holden has the ability to mature and become independent. However, he refuses to apply himself. In this case, he shows a lack of maturity.
You see, last Christmas, Holden got kicked out of his prissy private school for flunking all his classes, except English. Holla!
Dear Mr. Spencer, that is all I know about the Egyptians. I can't seem to get very interested in them, although your lecture was very interesting. It is all right with me if you flunk me, though as I am flunking everything else except English anyway. Respectfully yours, Holden Caulfield. This quote is an example of how Holden is lacking the drive to finish school on a strong note. In this case, we as a reader take this into consideration and understand that this could be a symbol of Holden not wanting to conform to the social norms.
Although Holden has hit puberty, he mentally is not ready to have sex. He even recognizes this and says, "Sex is something I just don't understand. I swear to God, I don't." This is because of Holden's internal struggle of not wanting to be an adult, but wants all the benefits of it. When trying to force himself to have sex, he calls up Faith, a woman who is loose in her morals, and he tries to take advantage but fails miserably. This is because he has no respect for her. This clearly shows Holden's maturity level, calling up a woman he never met before in hopes of getting laid, which displays his lack of respect for women. Holden gets more than a gray hair after Allie's death. He also developed a psychological disorder called Peru autismus, which is also known as Peter Pan syndrome. Peter Pan syndrome, typically associated with males, is when an individual is immature for their age group. The definition of this syndrome is childlike in their relationships, their ability to handle responsibilities, and their pursuit of pleasure. This fits Holden to a T. Holden can't keep a relationship with a woman. He wouldn't do his schoolwork, and he drinks, smokes, and does many other things just to seek pleasure.
Everyone matures at different rates. Holden tries to stop the process altogether. When looking at his mannerisms and his past, it is clear that his experiences, schooling, and environment had an influence on his ability or inability to mature.
That's all, folks.